Some Indigenous leaders in British Columbia are calling for Minister Carolyn Bennett to resign over a text message she sent to Independent MP Jody Wilson-Raybould. The message was just one word, pension, with a question mark. It attached Wilson-Raybould's tweet that urged the Prime Minister not to call an election and to act on residential schools. Wilson-Raybould shared it on Twitter, saying the minister's comment, quote, shows disregard, disdain, and disrespect for Indigenous peoples as in our history. Bennett tweeted, I offered my apologies directly to the MP for Vancouver-Granville. I let interpersonal dynamics get the better of me. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked how Indigenous groups can trust his government and this minister.
I spoke with Carolyn Bennett this morning. I know how hard she has worked and continues to work on this important file. I know her heart. I know the efforts she has put in over years on this. And we both understand that there is now even more work for her to do. And I know we will do it together.
The Union of B.C. Indian Chiefs is calling for Bennett's immediate resignation. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip is its president. He's in Penticton, B.C. Chief Phillip, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Your organization, you've called for Carolyn Bennett to step down. Why do you think this text meets the criteria for Carolyn Bennett to resign?
Well, quite frankly, I don't think she has the moral authority or the integrity to continue on as the minister, particularly in these incredibly challenging times, with the grisly discoveries of unmarked graves on a growing number of Indian residential schools. For her to respond to Jody Wilson-Raybould's concerns about these recent issues that we all know are genocidal in nature, with a shallow, insulting, petty remark such as pensions is absolutely inexcusable. It's a complete failure of her moral authority to continue to hold such a important office in terms of the government's ongoing assertions that relations with Indigenous people is the most important matter for them.
Does it matter at all that this was in an exchange or a remark between two former cabinet colleagues where there is not a good relationship, that this was, as inappropriate as it was meant to be private and it was a personal thing? Does that matter in any way?
No, not at all. Absolutely not. If you reflect back on that cabinet relationship, Jody Wilson-Raybould, as the Attorney General, was simply trying to advance the agenda, the commitment and promises made by the Trudeau government, and Carolyn Bennett was simply obstructing and not moving the agenda ahead, and very obstructionist.
Minister Bennett said yesterday that she apologized directly to Jody Wilson-Raybould and that she let the interpersonal dynamics get the better of her. She said she deeply regrets it and shouldn't have done it. Why isn't an apology not enough in this circumstance for you?
Well, I think, we need to understand this is much bigger than Minister Bennett and, her lame apology. I think that we need to understand this country is in crisis in regard to the recent discoveries of the unmarked graves of our children at a number of residential schools. And it takes somebody with a high level of integrity, empathy, and professionalism to hold such an important office as Minister Bennett holds. I think her time is up. I think it's time she stepped down as a gesture of remorse And let this be a lesson that we will not stand idly by while the Trudeau government smears our highly respected Indigenous leaders, particularly Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Minister Bennett's defenders have said that this was one mistake, this was one incident, and the totality of her work shows her commitment to reconciliation and her support for Indigenous peoples, and she shouldn't be judged on one mistake, but rather by everything she's done during her time as minister. Do you not buy that argument?
No, not at all. What work? Where's the evidence of this so-called work? There hasn't been any substantive progress in regard to the Indigenous file for far too long. You talk about, the failure on the part of the Trudeau government to follow through with fixing the domestic water systems in our communities. You talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women, the epidemic of youth suicides, homelessness, the lack of housing, the fundamental human rights, our basic dignity to have the means of the necessities of life have been completely denied as a result of the incompetence and the lack of commitment to the promises and that were made by the Trudeau government.
Well, the Trudeau government and Minister Bennett can defend their own record, and we've invited Minister Bennett to come on the show, and she's not available tonight. But you're right on, there are still dozens of long-term boil water issues that have not been addressed, but over 100 have. UNDRIP has become, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People has become the law of the land in the last couple of weeks. I mean, so is it really just no progress or just not enough progress?
No progress. The Truth and Reconciliation issued its report several years ago, and there were 94 calls to action, and the Trudeau government has failed to move decisively on those recommendations, which included recommendations pertaining to the residential school issue. Incompetence in these challenging times is unacceptable. It's time for Minister Bennett to move on and make room for somebody that is competent, that understands there needs to be a paradigm shift in terms of achieving the many lofty promises made by Mr. Trudeau himself.
So Mr. Trudeau, the Prime Minister, said today that what Minister Bennett did was wrong and that he was deeply disappointed by her actions, but that she's staying in cabinet. And he said that he knows the effort she has put in over the years on this and that there is now even more work for her to do. What do you think of the Prime Minister's comments from earlier today?
Quite frankly, we're getting tired of the theatrical, rhetorical statements and so-called apologies and empty promises made by the Prime Minister, and that very theatrical, contrite persona he advances through the public media. We want results. We demand results. Our people are dying in the streets of the major cities of this country. Our children continue to be apprehended in enormous numbers. The housing and the homelessness situation is absolutely atrocious. There's no second chances here. We need competence and we need decisive progress that can be measured rather than this ongoing, sickening theatrical rhetoric that we hear from the Trudeau government far too often.
Chief Stewart Phillip, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.